Hello, everyone. Welcome to Heads Together. I'm Bonnie Low-Kramen, your host, and I am here with my assistant, Jennifer Wilner. Hello, Jen.
Hi, Bonnie. Hi, everybody.
So I am here in Ponte Vedra, Florida, in my home, and we're really excited about today's episode on Wednesday, August 26th. Yes, 5th. 2021. Last week happened to have been Financial Awareness Day. And what we know is the subject of money is a hot button. It has been from the time I started working, and certainly it's been a hot button my whole career. How about you, Jen? Is money something that has been a problem with, or, an issue for you?
Yeah. I have to say, I really wish that maybe like 5 years ago that I had the financial, maybe advisors, people in my network that I have now. Definitely.
Yeah. And so is there anything you wished you knew?
Oh, wow. Yeah. What to do with inheritance? Not like millions of dollars by any means, but just the smallest a bit, knowing what to do with it and who to trust, because there's so much noise of people who give advice, and
Right.
that trust factor is so important. It's hard to kind of filter it all out.
Yeah. Well, and from the beginning of Be the Ultimate Assistant, it's been really obvious that, the profession of assistants are primarily women, 95 to 98% female, and women in general are not trained what to do about money. Hello, Heidi from Montana, and welcome to the show. Denise and Susan and Lynn, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are talking about money. Show me the money. Quick story. I was remembering, our guest today is going to, I'm so grateful that she's here, and she's going to be so honest with us about some of the hard lessons that she's learned about money. I'll never forget when it was several months before I had given notice with Olympia Dukakis, and I had given 4 months notice in that I was going to be leaving. And one day I received a phone call from the accountant, and he said, so I know you're going to be leaving. Where would you like the retirement money to go? And I said, what retirement money? That I had been working for 25 years. I know Jenny is in the background probably cringing right now. I'd been working for 25 years, and I didn't know about a percentage of my salary that was going into my retirement plan every single week. Can I tell you, that helped me buy a house after all of that was over. So yeah. I'm admitting, I vowed when that happened, it blew my mind. And I was thinking, how could I be so stupid? How? So I'm admitting it. So for everyone, I'm about to introduce our guest for today, but I want everyone listening to know to please put your comments, your questions in the chat for Jenny Shtipelman, and where she's going to answer a few questions. And then as we do here at Heads Together, she is really being generous about offering to answer your questions. And she's got some great resources for money if you're needing it. So here we go. I want to tell you about, hey, Betty and Sandy, welcome, welcome, welcome to the show. Really happy you're here. Our guest today, let me tell you a little bit about this lady. Jenny Shtipelman is her name. And if some of you may have been listening to the episode a few weeks back with my nephew, Jason Weisenthal, he is who I met Jenny through. This business is nothing if not about relationships. Jenny is based in Washington, D.C. She's been leading individuals and businesses in the D.C. area to financial success for nearly 20 years. We're in great hands today. She is knowledgeable about both marketing and operations. So she comes at her projects and her clients with that knowledge. She has a strategic approach And she works as a financial advisor and advisor coach at Ameriprise Financial in DC. She received her bachelor's in business administration in finance and marketing from George Washington University. She was voted one of the top 100 bankers in the DC area. And she's an active member of Cadre, which is how I met her, and a number of other organizations in the DC area. Can we please welcome Jenny Shtipelman? Hey, Jenny.
Yay. So happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, our audience is pouring in. We're so happy to have you here.
Wonderful.
And to learn about money. But first, let me ask you a few questions which will help our audience get to know you a little better.
Of course.
So what was your first job?
I was an interpreter. So to answer probably one of your other questions that we discussed, one thing that people would never guess about me is that I'm actually Russian originally. And so growing up in Russia, I also learned English, and I translated for a business. They were an export-import business and needed some English translation. And so
that started at age what?
16.
16 years old, and you're hanging out with adults.
Yes.
Translating.
Yeah. And in meetings. Looking back, it's very surreal.
Did it make you nervous at the time? Do you remember, or you were too young to even know to be nervous?
Well, yes, and I feel like it was definitely nervous because a lot of times it was simultaneous translation because I had to, hear what people were saying and make sure I communicated all the right things live, right? And so,
wow,
probably, but then you kind of get the hang of it and get it going.
Amazing.
I've lost some of that skill over the years, for sure.
So, what's your favorite binge watch?
Schitt's Creek. That has been my favorite.
Mine
and
too.
Prior to that, I love The Big Bang Theory. There's several. I love procedural shows, but Schitt's Creek is just something that makes me happy.
What's a favorite app on your phone?
Waze. I am super challenged with directions, and I turn to Waze almost every time I leave the house.
Me too. What's a stereotype that makes you crazy?
You know what? A lot of it has to do with women and just kind of how they get ahead. The stereotype that's out there that if you're pretty or if you're this, you're that.
Yeah.
So that just is kind of.
Banking is a pretty male-dominated field, right?
Very much so. And so I actually, to kind of insert quickly a little bit. So I started out as a financial advisor with Ameriprise, and now I've worked for several banks, and now I'm at a local community bank in DC area. I'm a senior vice president of commercial banking. And so definitely very male dominated. I'm very fortunate that our chief lending officer is actually a woman. And so she's great. And we, she's a great role model, and she's, we get along great.
Because it's tough being the only woman in the room, isn't it?
It's been interesting. You know what I mean? What I try to do is I try to reframe the parts that could potentially be perceived as tough, and just bring a little bit more curiosity and fascination to them, because I feel like you just change the energy that you bring to the room. And so, I'll always walk in with the head high and make sure that I voice whatever questions or concerns that I have. Once again, not to feed into some of those stereotypes.
Right. And so do you and that other woman have each other's backs? Is it either unspoken or spoken between the two of you?
Spoken, for sure.
Spoken.
For sure, it's great. Yeah. And we have other colleagues, and I've been with National Capital Bank now for a little bit over 2 years. And before that, I was with the Eagle Bank. And so I've had really good women colleagues at those places. I feel fortunate.
Yeah.
I've had some very interesting offers over the years from clients, from coworkers, and it's just one of those things that you can take it personally as a I guess a perception of you from other people, or you can not. And I've just chosen not to. So I feel like that's been very helpful.
Do you think things are changing for the better? Are you optimistic about that?
I am.
I am too.
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
So what's a guilty pleasure?
Food. I love to eat. So actually any type of cheese, and on the sweet side, cream puffs.
Cream puffs. And
And
pet
not
peeve?
pass it up.
What's a pet peeve?
You know what? Disrespect. And I guess it kind of ties back a little bit to stereotypes and stuff like that. And also bad drivers. And driving in DC, you have to be a little bit assertive. And so I've definitely tried to rush people, not rush them along physically, but kind of be like, come on, you got this. You don't have to make
I'm
a
in
full
Florida.
stop. Yes.
And I'm going on the record as saying, and I'm from New Jersey, I think the drivers in Florida, something happens with the heat or something. I think they are among the worst drivers in the country. So I'm saying it, I'm on the record. For all of our listeners, please put your comments, your questions in the chat. Some people are saying, yes, Schitt's Creek is awesome. Yes, it is. Okay. So, and then it is one thing, I know the whole Russian translation thing. Is there anything else that somebody would never guess about you?
Again, there's probably a lot. I'm a good shot. That's unexpected.
Oh, it is. Not only do you shoot, but you have great aim. Okay.
Yes.
So when we talked a few weeks back, you shared so honestly about some of the hard lessons that you've learned in your life and in your career about money. And, we agreed that a lot of people, women and men alike, wish that they could have a do-over with something like, I wish I'd known about my retirement money. That probably would have made me a lot less stressful. And of course, we can all learn from those hard lessons, mistakes, if you will. Could you share all of what you were sharing with me, Jenny?
Of course. So it's one of those things, and I kind of try to go back and rationalize and try to kind of do an autopsy of decisions, and how did we get from here to there, right? And it's, for me, I guess and maybe a lot of women that I know, is that we are just more nurturing naturally. And with that capacity to nurture comes, it's an important responsibility to ourselves that we don't recognize sometimes. And that's what I found with myself. For example, one of the things, Bunny, you and I talked about is I definitely, and remember, my career was in finance, my degree is in finance. So a lot of these things I could say I should have known better. However, again, the nurturing, it just didn't click until it clicked and it was too late. But and this is now, I'm dating myself, it's been several years, but I was in a relationship where my significant other at the time was having a hard time financially. And so I had let him borrow money, and then he was still having a hard time. And so I let him use a credit card just for his use, because again, he was having a hard time and we're in love, and what could go wrong, right? And everything did. And next thing I know, payments are not being made. The card is maxed out. And essentially I gifted him probably $25,000. I mean, it's a lot of money, right? Like in the huge scheme of things, it's not a lot of money, but it's a lot of money. And, next thing I know, because the payments weren't being made, the credit score went down. It just was a really slippery slope that I had to dig myself out of. And so if I could do something over, would I have done that? I would like to think that the answer is no, keeping in mind that I really like who I am as a person right now. And maybe or maybe not, I would have been that person had things been different earlier in my career, right? And so
is there a way to do it? Is there a better way to do it? Like if you could,
I would have said, if I had a do over, I would have maybe done an agreement of some kind of a legal document where he would be obligated to pay me back. Or if he wasn't, he was building a business, maybe I would have a portion of that business or something like that. So it was either debt or equity. And so again, there was trust, but I would never say to anyone, don't trust your significant others or friends or whatever it is. Just make sure that you're not creating a win for them and lose potentially for you. Make sure it's a win-win. And the way to do that is to make sure that both sides are protected. Right. It's kind of like when I talk to my clients or my friends who are business owners, and this is what friends of mine who are attorneys have said to me when I've talked about starting a business or a partnership in a business, is you always have an operating agreement where it speaks very specifically about what happens when there's a disagreement that cannot be resolved. You're not, and it doesn't mean that you're going into something expecting it to fail, not at all. It just means that we're all human and no two people are alike, and you have a way to resolve conflict.
Yeah. So. I mean, we talk a lot in the assistant world about putting things in writing, job descriptions and compensation deals, et cetera.
Yes.
So did that impact your credit score, and what kind of credit score should our listeners be shooting for?
So it did at the time. It's back. Again, this was probably good 10, 15 years ago. And so I was able to build it back up. Credit score is an important thing, and I would definitely recommend everyone keep an eye on it. And whether or not we like the organized financial system, it's there for a reason, and we can take advantage of it if we're knowledgeable about it. I'm not saying that no one should have credit or you shouldn't borrow things when it makes sense to borrow things, but credit scores, normally when you're looking at borrowing, try to make sure your credit score is above like a 740. Like if it's a little bit below that, as long as it's still above a 700, it's okay. But 740 and above is normally what, when you look at whatever these credit score sites, that shows as excellent. And so essentially it just shows any type of potential creditor. And this is anyone from a mortgage lender to a car dealer to, I just recently got a mattress and I got 0%, interest rate because I didn't want to dump all that money all at once.
So it impacts your credit score, impacts the interest.
It impacts because what it shows is a level of risk that a creditor is potentially taking. A good credit score means that you're in a habit of paying your bills on time. Right. Again, my credit score dipped after a situation like that, and I was able to build it back up. So there's a way to do that. I know people who sometimes after a divorce, it affects your credit because there is a separation of assets, payments are not made. There are sometimes business situations that affect your credit score. Sometimes it can't be helped. Right. What I recommend or what I invite people to do is not stay in that situation and not essentially say, you know what, there's nothing I can do. It's just going to be what it is. It's going to be low. And then I'm going to blame anything else that I cannot get on this.
Is there an easy, free place to get your credit score, Jenny? Is that easily found on Google or?
So yeah, you can Google it. A lot of credit card companies now offer you a free credit score check.
So we can just contact our own credit card company?
Absolutely. A lot of them have it. So if you have any of the like Chase or Capital One, any of them, if you have their mobile app, you can enroll into like a credit monitoring and it's free. And you can check it and it doesn't hurt your credit score as long as you go through them to check it.
Fantastic. So we have a question in the chat about retirement, and I was going to ask you about retirement because that's one of those subjects that Diane is asking if investing in an index universal life policy as you head towards retirement is a good product to protect your money for retirement. Do you have an opinion on that? I guess.
So I would say it depends, and here's why. So I, in the beginning of my career, I was a financial advisor, and so I was a lot more knowledgeable about those things. I'm saying it depends is because it depends on what your goals are. And I have friends who are financial advisors who, some of them swear by universal or whole life policies. Some of them recommend other things. It all depends on your financial situation. It all depends on what your free cash flow is and how much you can invest in that policy, whether you're maxing it out or not. So I would say find a good financial advisor that can walk you through your whole financial picture. The thing with retirement or anything else is that it's going to be very difficult to take kind of a piecemeal approach and say, okay, over here, I'm going to deal with insurance. Over here, I'm going to deal with 401ks. Over here, I'm going to deal with pensions. Over here, I'm just going to have some stocks and bonds and marketable securities account. Over here, I'm going to have a savings account and maybe a couple of CDs. And you need, or not need, but I invite you to speak to someone who can put it all together so that you have a clear picture of what it is that you have, number one. They will talk to you about what your risk tolerance is, because one of the biggest things that you don't want to come across is, and especially now, the market has been really hot, right? And as human beings, we're like, am I missing out? Like, should I be investing in all these things?
Right.
And like cryptocurrency or stuff like that, that is super interesting and has a ton of potential. And there's certain things that you invest your money in, and you have to be okay with losing all of it. And if you're not, then maybe you shouldn't invest all of it in those instruments. And the way that I look at it is I have my plan where I have long-term investments, and then I have some more medium-term investments, and then I have play money that if it all goes away, it's not the end of the world for me.
Right. And, there are decisions to be made whether a person's going to retire at 62 or 65 or 66 and a half,
right.
And so would and you've come here today with even a resource for a financial advisor.
That's right.
With the person you recommend be able to talk through the pros and cons of, well, if you do it at 62, it's going to be this. And if you do it at 65, it'll be this.
All of those calculations can be done, and a good financial planner will be able to do that for you. What I also invite everyone to do, and a good friend of mine, Jason also knows him as well. He's actually writing a book right now about the myth of retirement. Because if you think about it, I kind of agree with it, right? There's a big difference between retiring from your job, right? And just retiring to do nothing. Most of us are not looking to do nothing, right? There's stuff that we want to do. We want to travel. We want to pursue our passions.
Right.
And why would that mean that you can't also contribute, right, by pursuing your passion? So does that mean that you're retired, right, fully, or are you still working because you're actually helping and contributing? So that's a really interesting word for me always. And all of us, I'm sure, have heard stories about people retiring and then they have nothing else to do and they literally die weeks or months later. It's because
those are heartbreaking stories, aren't they? Where they were waiting for something and then it, life has a way of turning on us. So one of the questions is, like, the person you have to suggest to us today, Jen is going to put her name in the chat.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Emily Promise is her name.
What a great name for a financial person. Emily Promise.
Absolutely. And she works specifically, she loves working with women. And that's one of the reasons why I really had a conversation with her. She is wonderful. She can work with people all over the country. It doesn't have to be in a geographical area. She's in North Carolina, I believe, herself. And she actually, if you wanted to find her on Instagram, she has a page called Promise for Women. So that's a great tag.
Jen is putting all of her info in the chat. And do you happen to know, Jenny, is her work fee-based, or is it a percentage of the
I'm not 100% sure. I believe that it all depends on what the situation is. There's advisors that are strictly one way or another. There's advisors that are more financial planning based, where you pay for the plan and then have the products. And so I think it all depends on where everyone starts with her individually.
Right. And I feel sure she's the kind of person who would do a discovery call.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And she, one of her passions is actually educating women about the no question is too small. There's no such thing as no question is silly or stupid. Because again, and it's interesting. I'm wondering if it's training or just societal expectations, but as women, it's not just a concern. Like money will kind of come or take care of itself, or, whatever happens. And so she is really, one of the things that her and I talked about is she's actually meeting with some of the clients, couples. She's meeting with women specifically to make sure that everyone is on the same page about everything that they talk about.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, again, women, we're not comfortable using our voices. And so,
Ain't it the truth about a lot of things, about a
Exactly.
whole lot of things.
Exactly.
Someone's asking, do you have an opinion about Credit Karma?
So Credit Karma is a credit monitoring site. It's, you know what, there's so many different ones. I don't remember if it's free or there's a monthly fee. Again, I've found that the free ones through credit cards, such as I have Chase and I have Capital One, are sufficient for me, that I don't need anything extra. I definitely, in terms of just monitoring, I recommend I go and I check my just bank account activity every couple of days to make sure that there's stuff in there, that there's not stuff in there that I don't recognize.
Yep.
I definitely find also, and this is the same for personal as well as on the business side, I recommend it to my clients who are business owners, is some people just don't like debt, right? And so they would rather not have credit cards or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I completely respect that. You don't have to have a credit card. You can use a debit card. Just know that if there's fraud, it has to be caught in order to be, for you to get your money back. It has to be caught much sooner in a debit card. So you have to be a lot more vigilant about checking it than if it was on a credit card.
Interesting.
So,
and Shelly's sharing that Credit Karma is free, or, like a lot of apps, there's a free version and then there's a paid version.
Right.
Jenny, the pandemic has thrown so many people into, just feelings of uncertainty and certainly stress and anxiety. And when I ask my students in rooms who are mostly women, what's the stress level on a scale of 1 to 10? How, with 10 being the most, how much stress does the subject of money cause you? And I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised that they yell out, 8,
15,
9, 12, 15, right?
Yes.
What are you seeing? What are some of your thoughts about this post-pandemic, almost post-pandemic financial climate, and what should we be mindful of? What are some of the things we should be thinking about?
So that's a really good question. It's a really interesting situation. I feel like this pandemic has really shined a light on a lot of things that we were kind of sweeping under the rug. It has made people reassess their priorities. A lot of times, with a lot of people who have a lot of friends and colleagues who used to travel a lot for work, and with the pandemic, obviously that stopped. And now going back, they're just not going to have the same busy schedule. In terms of money, and here I had the, I guess, I'm not sure if it's good luck or not, but I was able to work with a lot of business owners, which a lot of them were just watching their life circle the drain because they had to shut down their businesses. Everything stopped. And this is where, how like a lot of times we hear that you should have savings 3 to 6 months of your expenses in the savings account.
Yeah.
You hear that all the time. Whether you actually do it is a whole different story, right? And there's always the next paycheck that you're going to set some money aside.
Yep.
Well, the chickens came to roost. There was no next paycheck for a lot of them potentially, and there was no money saved. And where do you go from here? And thank goodness a lot of them were able to either get unemployment, or a lot of the business owners were able to obtain the Paycheck Protection Program loans. And so they were able to persevere through the shutdown periods and the rest of the pandemic. But this is where now, through this lived experience, we know that, I'm helping people set up automatic transfers from their checking to their savings accounts, and really be mindful about, what it is that you need. What is the number one? What is the bare minimum? One of the things that kind of just living our life, I feel like, and I'm 100% guilty of it, is as we progress in our careers, we make a little bit more money, suddenly our needs expand, right? Now, what we don't realize, we don't pay attention to, those are not needs, those are wants. Maybe they're like, we really, really want it, but we don't really need it. And so what this pandemic did is make us realize, okay, this is what you want, but what do you really need, right? In any given day, week, or month. And so I feel like now we can really break that down. And no matter how small you're starting, it's a beginning. It's kind of like, what they say about runners is that it doesn't matter how fast or slow or often you run. If you run, you're a runner. And it's similar to me, at least with savings. It doesn't matter if you start with $5 a week, at least you're starting, you're saving. And that is going to build up over time. And to me, like with my situation, I've had to make it automatic. So every time there's a paycheck I get paid, some money gets transferred to a savings account. So to me, out of sight, out of mind. If I have too much, I'm like, ooh, I can travel. I can do this, I can do that. When in reality, I'm like, again, is it a need or is it a want? And so.
Okay. Jen, any questions that I've missed here? And so we've put Emily's information in the chat as a resource. AppMint.
I think that, isn't that app where you can combine all of your accounts so you can see them all in one place? I think that's the one. It's helpful. There's several apps that also, they make it easy to make those transfers to the savings. Absolutely. Whatever works. I find that sometimes for me, when I have too many apps and are overcomplicated, then I don't do any of it. For me, the simplest is the best. And it's one step at a time. For me, without any other apps, what I've done is I just set up a transfer from my checking to my savings. Then once I've accumulated a certain amount of money in my savings, I then transfer it to a different account. So either marketable securities or whatever else it is. Whenever I make a little bit extra, I actually transfer it to my crypto wallet. So I have some play money that I can put aside and, invest in that. And so for me, it's kind of like when I hit this hurdle, this goes here. When I hit this hurdle, this goes here.
Yeah. Do you have an opinion on the kind of credit cards? There seem to be a lot of flavors of credit cards,
Yes.
Ones that are tied to the airlines. So you can get airline credits, some that give cash back, and the commercials it's kind of hard to,
Yes.
how do you decide?
Oh, honestly, it depends on what it is you're interested in. I love to travel. So I actually have an airline credit card, because what I do is then when a certain number of those miles accumulate, I either get free tickets or I upgrade whenever I fly on the miles. So that to me is an important perk.
That's worth it. Better than cash back.
Absolutely. Well, so it depends, because I definitely have friends who spend for their businesses a lot on their card and they get cash back, and they've paid for equipment with the cash back. They've paid for events. They've paid for some memberships and stuff like that. So you know what? It all depends. What is your life like? Do you travel?
Right.
If you do, then it may make sense to take advantage of the miles cards. And also there's now cards, I think Capital One has them, where it's points that can be translated into either miles or other rewards.
Yeah.
And so it honestly all depends on what you want to do.
Honestly, I think one of the things when I look back and I wish I had done is try to think about the age that I wanted to retire at, or age to stop working.
Yeah.
We're not trained as women to think about those questions.
No.
And then it's simple math, isn't it? Like, you're at the age you're at, and then it's how long do you want to work? And I've started asking that in our workshops. So that then you're left with a number, like this many years to work. And so what do those years look like as a buildup to what's next? So do you have any thoughts on that, Jenny?
Yes. So for me, and it's interesting because and maybe it's my personality, maybe it's my gender, I'm not sure, but I always feel like I have more time than what I actually have, right? Maybe it's because I procrastinate or I just don't like thinking about the responsibility or how soon. So I'm 43, right? And so how much longer do I want to work? And then going back to what I said before, what am I passionate about that I'm going to want to do for the rest of my life potentially, or as long as I can as long as I'm physically able to do it,
Right.
and they can still generate a certain level of income, right? And so I feel like it, in terms of the full-time job that we feel like we have to do to pay our bills, yes. So until what age do you feel like that's appropriate?
Right.
60, 65, I mean, we can look at some government mandates, and maybe 70. I've seen some really, really vibrant people in their 70s, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that, right?
And after
And
what age can you make as much money as you feel like? Is it 65 or is,
what do you mean?
you know what I mean? Like if you can't take Social Security until a certain point, but
Right.
at some age you can collect it and still work as much as you want.
At any age. So you can start taking Social Security, I think it's 65 and a half, something like that. If you have 401k retirement plans, you have to start taking minimum distributions from them in the year that you turn 70 and a half. However, you can still work if you want to. That
Right.
doesn't stop. Doesn't
Okay.
have to.
So Emily can advise people on that, but it really
Absolutely.
becomes about taking a look at your life and how do you want it to play out?
That's exactly it. What do you like to do? And no matter whether you're 20 years old, 40 years old, or 60 years old, when you want to start working, what are your plans? Do you want to travel? Do you want to visit with your family? Do you want to sit at home? There's
Yeah.
no wrong answer,
I
right?
think that's a worthwhile exercise.
It
And like
really is.
nobody's got a gun to your head. Like if you change your mind, okay. But it's
Mhm.
worth having those thoughts because life happens
It
and
does.
I just wish I'd thought about it way, way sooner.
Well,
But
and you know what? With my education, I wish I'd started sooner. Like there's not there's not a too late place to start,
yeah.
and obviously there's not a too early place to start. Again, having a building nest egg will, and I find this is where money is not everything, but money gives you choices.
We have
And
options.
exactly.
Options are good. Options
Mhm.
are good.
Mhm.
So, for everyone on this call, I mean, I like to think that Heads Together serves that purpose, is to expose some of these questions to get the wheels turning, and
Mhm.
maybe others will benefit from the hard
Absolutely.
lessons we've had. But
Absolutely.
Jenny, do you have any last thoughts? Is there a favorite book or website? I know you've shared Emily's information, which is
Mhm.
terrific, but is
Mhm.
there anything, any final thoughts you have for us in terms of resources or just an idea or two?
Well, so my favorite quote is actually, I found it, and this is something just to think about again. No one is in a wrong place, and even if something changed, just because things could have been different doesn't mean they would have been better, right? And so
Mm,
it doesn't. Adam Grant said that, um, and I, again, you're not wrong. Everything happens for a reason. Don't
mhm.
beat yourself up for where you are right now,
Yeah,
because tomorrow is another day, and today is another day to start whatever it is that you're trying to
right.
do.
I love
So
that concept that tomorrow's a great day to start.
exactly.
Whatever it is about
Hmm.
money,
Hmm.
about eating better, whatever it is. Because my gosh, this pandemic has certainly shone a bright light on the fragility of life. And
Absolutely.
what I'm a big fan of the John Lennon quote, which is life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
Absolutely. Yes.
So,
Yes.
Jenny, thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
Jen, if you can put up the scroll, I just want everybody to know that we still have seats available for Be the Ultimate Assistant in Houston, in a few weeks on September 22, 23, 24. We're going to be live. Yes, we are safely, but we will be live in Colorado Springs in November. And of course, the Be the Ultimate Assistant on Demand workshop is available to you via betheultimateassistant.com. I also want to let everybody know about a guest that is now secured for September 15th. So a few weeks from now, please mark your date, save the date for this. Our guest will be Stacy Pinkerton. Stacy was one of 63 rape survivors from the Bill Cosby case. She was one of the people who testified at the trial, and she is now speaking on the very important topic of abuse of power. And if you have followed me for any length of time, you know that I am deeply concerned and interested in exposing issues around abuse of power, about workplace bullying, sexual harassment, sexual assault, something that the population of assistants knows quite a lot about, given the 95 to 98% female metric for our profession. So that is happening on Wednesday, September 15th. It's going to be an hour show. If there's anyone you know who has been impacted in any way on this subject, I urge you to be with us on that day. Stacy is passionate about this subject and certainly so knowledgeable about it, since it's something that happened to her at age 21, and now it's quite a few years later. So with that, Jenny Shtipelman, thank you so much for being here, you Russian translating genius about all things financial. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Jen Wilner from behind the scenes there. And thank you all for being here with us today. Please share this episode with those who need to hear this information about how to be smarter, make better choices about money, and certainly share Emily's information. Thank you all for being here.